Word up. Special guest this week, the one and only Eternia. Pops was a gangster, mother was God's property. That makes her something sort of special, like an Odyssey. It's great to see you again. I'm excited about the new album. I'm excited to hear about what's happening in your life. How's it going?
Man, that was a great introduction. That's a good summary. That kind of summarizes a lot. It's going good. It's going good. Just one day at a time, you know?
Yeah. I see the baby shower balloons in the background.
Yeah, I had to show them off, you know?
That's awesome.
They're just so epic.
Absolutely. When are you due?
Yeah, we recently celebrated Kingston, the upcoming birth of Kingston.
Okay.
Middle of October 21st, maybe. We'll see. So I'm dropping the album and the baby within a couple of weeks from each other.
Word up. That's he's gonna have a crowded birthday for the rest of his life, but I think it's gonna be a statement.
Right, exactly.
You know, I was looking back at some of our previous conversations, and I do want to start with something that you said back in 2010. And so you came on to, I think it was Brooklyn Bodega Radio. I think it was that one instead of the Company Man Show. It was Brooklyn Bodega Radio. And we were talking about At Last. And At Last is, for anyone who hasn't heard At Last Year, Punch Yourself in the Face, it was released on Fat Beats in 2010. Incredible. It's got Joel Ortiz on it, Rod Digger, Maestro Fresh West, Moss is the co-producer. It was a statement album during that time. And I asked you about your next project, and here's what you said. It's a little lengthy, but bear with me. The first thing you said was, taking a lot of time to wait on God. And the second thing you said was, most people in the business find that crazy because it's one of those things where you're just trying to stay relevant. You're trying to align yourself with people that people are checking for. You're trying to stay busy and promote and do all these things. I call it default artist mode. Record, release, tour, promote, record, release, tour, promote. It could become like a robot. And I'm trying to step out of the matrix, step out of robot mode, and really be intentional about when I'm on stage and when I'm in the studio and when I'm releasing. I don't think necessarily you knew it would be this long of a gap between projects, but do you feel like you've stepped out of the matrix, so to speak?
Absolutely. I feel like hearing that back, it almost sounded like someone else said it. Like, I can't believe that I did. And it sounds really prophetic. It really does. So I guess maybe I've been more on target than I thought I was. I thought I was way off target just like the last 10 years, the last decade. Just like, what am I doing? But hearing that statement, I'm like, oh, well, I was intentional and I did wait on God and I did step out of the matrix. And the whole concept behind this album is really recording in freedom without thinking about those things that I just mentioned in that quote about like aligning yourself with certain people or doing certain things just to stay relevant. And all of that, the inspiration behind the album Free is to be free in the creation process and the release process and the process of emptying yourself for the world. So yeah, I guess I was on point with that. Although no, I did not expect it to be so long.
How long have you been actually actively working on Free?
Free, the inception, the idea behind it started spring of 2018. I applied for a grant with Moss for a follow-up album for At Last called Amen. We got the grant in September of 2018, which is my first trimester of pregnancy with now my 2-year-old son, Parrish. So I'm pregnant. I find out I got the grant, and grants are basically what motivates me to do records because I have a deadline and I have someone that I have to answer to. And in the beginning of 2019, it became apparent that my timing with Moss wasn't really lining up. Just getting stuff done, and I was really antsy to get stuff done because I was pregnant and he was kind of on a different page. So I took a pause, and then I revisited it after Parrish was born, so summer of 2019. And Moss basically blessed both Rel and myself to like basically do a project together. Without him, he met, like, I talked to Moss and he met with Rel in person. And that was kind of cool because he told Rel, she's like the hardest working MC I've ever known. Like, it's going to be dope. So we got his blessing. We started working on the project together. And so, yeah, I'd say fall of 2019 is when me and Rel really started cracking on the record.
Yeah. Was it a different recording experience from when you worked with Moss? I mean, that was
100%.
That was an amazing team up between the two of you. And I think this one is really, really poignant as well. But what's the
everything about the making of this album is 100% different than how I made At Last. Not because that's the way I wanted it to be, but just by virtue of everything from having a child to traveling a lot. I moved 5 times in the period of maybe 2 years. Around the time I got married and had a child, I moved 5 times in 2 years. So I wasn't available. Rel was. I was all over the place. And then COVID. So this album was recorded in a lot of different places. Some in person with Rel, but a lot of it was virtual as well.
You have a line on the album that seems to lean in that direction. But I mean, I think this is more about your childhood, but it's funny to hear you say that you're still as moving around as much. On Home, you say 15 schools, 5 states, plus 5 cities in the province of the Great Lakes. And, I started thinking about, just how powerfully you've told your story on Wax over the years. And you've overcome a lot of adversity. It sounds like that lyric I referenced on Home is more about your childhood and growing up and some of the things that you conquered as you were crafting something extraordinary. But it seems like you're still moving around, but much happier circumstances. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I'm going to have to add to that list of numbers because there's been additions to the cities and the states. I think that was just an overview of how do I summarize how nomadic I've been. And I tried to do an overview, and that song Home that you referenced is really, I mean, all the songs on the record are near and dear to my heart, but that one was one that I really was trying to capture the feeling of, I don't want to say homelessness, but like being a balloon that's untethered and feeling like you have no grounding in life and constantly seeking that feeling of home. And even at the age and stage that I'm at in life, that's still something that I think I struggle with just based on my, my life and how I was raised. And so even if I am planted in a place with people that love me, it still can sometimes feel like you're outside of yourself, watching yourself, having these moments that are precious and special, but it's like you're on the outside looking through a window pane. It's a really interesting feeling. It's a disconnected feeling. And I think that can come a lot from just being so used to being displaced or not staying in one place for very long or not being in a situation for very long. And that's still a feeling that I have to this day.
Well, one of the things I thought that really stood out to me on this project, and it hit home in a lot of ways I didn't expect it to, was the intro. I mean, the intro felt like a testament to imposter syndrome, if that's fair.
Yeah, that's really, it's funny you mentioned that because my husband just a couple of days ago told me he thinks I have a case of imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I mean, you're saying,
Mr. Lift.
Shout out to Mr. Lift, the one and only. I mean, you're saying I'll never get my strength back. I mean, was this part of the challenge in putting this music out? It's given the duration of time and also all the things that you've experienced since.
Yeah, I think what I would strive to do in the intro, and it is kind of like a spiritual juxtaposition, as it were, because the singing underneath it is the truth, I believe, God's voice per se. And then all the voices on top are the voices of fear and regret and insecurity, but all real voices that clamor for our attention every day. And a lot of them are things that I think so consistently. The I'll never get my strength back one was pertaining specifically to, I had a work burnout or like a mental health burnout in 2016. I was working at a long-term care home, specifically with the population that was like end of life population. Loved it, loved them. Didn't realize it was doing a number on me. And then one day it was just like snap. And so subsequently, it's almost like I haven't, and then I had a concussion 6 months later. And I only bring that up to say that it was very interesting that when I experienced the symptoms of a concussion, they were almost identical to the symptoms of a mental health or work burnout.
Oh, wow.
Very interesting. Like I was already like, oh, I've been experiencing all this already. So the I'll never get my strength back thing was just kind of like, am I even fully recovered? Like, am I back to my old operational self, my productive self, my feeling like me self? And that's something that I still, after the mental health thing, the concussion, then having a baby, which any woman, and maybe a man who's observed a woman, but any woman who's had one knows that takes every ounce of your being, and you often don't really feel like yourself for a long time, whether it's postpartum depression or just actually adjusting to being a mom. And so like just thinking, am I ever going to be my former, vibrant, full, fulfilled, like full being, and that's something that I'm struggling to. Some days I feel like that, a lot of days I don't.
How'd you suffer a concussion?
Oh, it's kind of silly. It's a funny story. I was on my bicycle. I was not wearing a helmet. I was barely moving. I was moving very slow, but I had like $150 worth of groceries on my bicycle.
Okay.
So I'm moving mad slow, pulling out of a parking lot and tipped over. But when I tipped over with all those groceries, there was a brick wall, and I literally fell back and hit my head against the brick wall. So it could have been worse, but I was like, I did have the symptoms. And I just remember thinking, oh, I've already had these symptoms 6 months ago with the mental health burnout.
What are the symptoms that are in common between the two? I mean,
very good question. Yeah. The dizziness, the wooziness, the feeling extra like kind of anxious or frustrated or impatient, the screen time kind of not being good for you, the being overstimulated in rooms with people. Like when I had a concussion, I would sit on my front porch, and even just how fast the cars were going or walking down steps, I'd be shaky. And I was like that with the mental health burnout was very physical as well.
My mom has dementia, and she's suffering from that. And I could see it in her face, how frustrated she is not being able to adapt to different rooms or communicate the way she has before. You know, it stood out to me that you referenced.
The population that I worked with in the long-term care home was predominantly people with dementia. I love them; they're the best. But
yes, they definitely. But
yes, it is. No, but it is a frustrating existence for sure to be in that place and to know that you can be, you know that you can be better, or you are understanding, but you can't communicate. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I think another song that stood out to me on this project, just given your career, is Most People. I mean, that's probably my favorite song on the track, on the album.
Oh, that's cool to know. That's cool to know, yeah.
I love it. I love the way it bounces. I love the whole vibe of it.
Dope.
And you say, I don't know if it was God or my sin. Self-sabotage or wisdom of the ages kicking in. All I know is I left. And now when I look back, I have to wonder if I blew my one shot for impact. So,
that's a line that I have to feed myself a lot, because that summarizes it.
Yeah. I mean, do you feel like that? Do you feel like you missed your shot for impact?
I feel like on certain days, I'm like, God took me exactly where I needed to go. I learned the lessons I needed to learn. I had the self-development I needed. Like everything that's happened in the last 10 years is exactly how it was supposed to happen. Other days, I'm like, yo, leaving New York City at the height of my career, at the height of when I just bust through a glass ceiling and doors were opening for me and the gatekeepers were like, open it wide. And people were kind of excited to see me when I showed up to a spot and all this. Leaving New York City at the height of my career might've been the stupidest thing I ever did. But so I have lived with some regret for that. But at the same time, I have to trust that, okay, you know, that first quote you said about like waiting on God and leaning on God, like I have to trust that moving back to Toronto and kind of focusing on family and a regular life was something that I needed to do. So we'll never really know what would have happened if I had stayed. But when I left New York City was really when it was like a hard stop when it came to the career.
Now, you left because of family for personal reasons, or did you just kind of want to get out of the industry? I mean,
a little bit of both. I think my heart and my spirit was feeling like a lot of other things were suffering as I was pursuing my hip hop career, and that it was coming at a cost and that I was becoming a slave to it as opposed to being in control of it. So I feel like a recalibration was necessary. It's like the pendulum had to shift in the other direction. Yeah. And I'm hoping now like extremes beget extremes. So I kind of went way the opposite way. I'm like, I'm going to work in a long-term care home and like just be, you know, and then now I hope the pendulum's kind of landed in the middle.
Yeah. Did you feel like you were, I mean, it sounded like you're describing losing yourself to a degree. I mean, that's something I think people hear about in entertainment. Artists going through it, actors go through it. I mean, we've all seen Dave Chappelle talk about how he had to hit the eject switch, you know.
And I didn't feel like I had to go as far as they did to feel that way. It wasn't as extreme or as far, but I remember acutely near the end feeling like I'd rather be watching a movie, organizing the clothes in my closet or painting my toenails than getting on stage and performing. Wow. And when I started to feel that way, I was like, it's time to take a break because I want to be as genuine as possible with all of the people that are supporters of my music. And I don't want to be out there. I never want to not be doing what I'm doing. You know what I'm saying? Like people will sense that. So that's when I started to say, okay, maybe it's time to, you know.
What do you think it was about being on stage that made you rather do laundry?
I don't think it was the being on stage part. I love, actually, when I get on stage, I love it. It's like flying. It's very meditative for me. It's therapeutic. It's emptying of myself. But I think all the things surrounding that, I think more like the industry and the business and the stuff surrounding it, the befores and the afters and the promo and the, like, you know, just the entire industry of it, I think was something that was starting to tire me out. But once again, I didn't have to go as far as some people to feel that way.
Yeah. The other thing I like about that verse is that you really own the impact that you did get a chance to make in the music game and people's lives, especially young women's lives. You know, you have a line in here, you says, I paved the way before you, now you bust through. I'm proud of that. For the record, it's true. I'm proud of you and you and you. All the females killing the game. I used to be the only one in my lane, and that's boring anyway. I'm glad they let you in too, but don't get it twisted. They'll leave you quick when they're through.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a, you know, a warning sign as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I meant and feel every word, though. All that kind of poured out of my heart without an edit. And that's kind of what I experienced. I think I'm speaking from personal experience there. I feel that way now. I feel that as much as people have been asking for new music and a new album for the last decade, now that it's here, it just feels like, and when I say this, I don't know if I'm referring to the fans and the listeners as much as I'm referring to the industry and the media and the press or whatever, whoever covers music these days, maybe they're playlist curators, but yeah, it just kind of feels like on to the next, you know? And there's this thing about loyalty, especially in hip hop. It's one thing that I love so much about hip hop in New York City is that there's certain cats that, like, if they think you're dope, they are loyal to the end. You are one of them. And Eclipse is one of them, and Primo is one of them, and just people that are like, yo, I don't care if people, if, like, you know, you dropped 10 years ago or whatever, like, if it's dope, it's dope. But we need a lot more of that in the industry. I don't experience that too much. You know, I've actually been really shocked by the fact that Canadian outlets that have always shown me love, I'm from Canada, are just kind of watching, but not really doing much more than watching right now when it comes to the new album. And I hope that changes, but it's been really shocking to me. You're
a Juno Award nominee.
I don't know what the deal is, and maybe it's just algorithms. I don't know, but yeah, it's been a humbling ride this time around, and I have to keep on reminding myself as to why I make music in the first place, because otherwise it can get, it's different. The entire game has changed, and we're doing everything virtually, and I haven't been out there for a long time. So as one person mentioned, it's like reps in the gym. You can't expect to lift the same weights you were lifting when you haven't been to the gym for 10 years. So that's how I'll try to view it.
That's definitely the truth. How's your health? How's your health? Are you healthy? It seems like your family's healthy. Spiritually, you sound healthy. You're glowing.
Oh man, spiritually is up and down, but I do focus on, I think for me, the spiritual reality of things is the most important. And I view everything kind of like a holistic whole, the physical, the emotional, the mental, like all of it's one whole, but it's like the spiritual is at the core if it was an earth, you know, with the atmosphere and the layers. And so everything's spiritual, everything. Yeah, I mean, my health is, I feel really blessed. I feel really good. I don't feel anything other than 50 pounds heavier carrying around a baby that's about to come out. Right. But this year we did receive some really sobering news. I had in my 9-week or 10-week ultrasound, they scanned my kidneys, which is not what techs typically do in those ultrasounds, but they decided to scan my kidneys, and they discovered renal cell carcinoma, which is a kidney cancer, form of kidney cancer. And so honestly, like, I feel weird mentioning it simply because I feel like I've got the best of cancers, if that's strange to say. It has not metastasized, which means it hasn't spread. It's early detection. It's not huge. And there usually are some good results with the surgery that I'm going to have after the baby comes out that takes out a part of your kidney and the cancer. So I'm going into it with a lot of, and I don't just say this sounds really weird, but it was miracle after miracle after miracle when it came to how we even discovered that we had this. And I don't think it's more likely than not that 10 years from now, I would have discovered this and it would have been all over my body. So it's just like a miracle that we discovered it when we did. So I'm just excited to see what God's doing. Like, I literally am, there's this whole thing you mentioned at the top, wait on the Lord. I said something like that. And it's true. It's like, but waiting expectantly and excitedly to be like, all right, God, what you got? Like, I'm excited to see what you got. And when it comes to this, I'm excited to see what God's going to do. I feel very hopeful about the prognosis.